Welcome back to the Dialed In Podcast. I'm Mo, and as always, I'm here with Gene. How you doing, buddy?
Doing well. Can't complain. Another week, another episode. So excited for this topic. Speaking of, before we dive into that, tell me what's on the wrist.
You know, today on the wrist, I've got my Oyster Perpetual 41 millimeter celebration dial.
Ooh, that's a good one.
A little fun one.
And you got in early on that.
I did. Pre-discontinuation.
Well, for me, today I'm wearing Baltic. I've got
which one?
A Tri-Compax black dial with sort of white subdials. For whatever reason, the way that the lighting works on it, the hues, the white subdials look a little bit almost greenish. But love this watch, super easy to wear, and one of my favorite micro brands.
Dude, I'm such a fan of Baltic. We gotta talk more about Baltic on the pod. Maybe we'll even do like a micro brand episode. But I just think what they do is phenomenal.
Oh, I totally agree. One of my favorite brands as well. But that being said, what are we talking about today?
Dude, we're talking about we're talking about myths in the watch industry. Or watch collecting ecosystem, I'll say. Like, they're the most common and at times stupid myths you hear about watches, and mainly from people on the internet. But even, sales associates at boutiques that'll tell you things that just aren't always true. And so I think it's our job and our duty to debunk some of these myths today. But before we do that, for every listener tuning in right now, one, we love you. Thank you for choosing us. Thank you for listening to us on your drive, during your workout, whenever, wherever you're listening. You're awesome. And because of that, we want to actually hear from you. And we're not trying to collect email addresses. We're not going to spam you. This is going to be totally anonymous. If you go to the show notes, there's a link to a survey. I'm going to post this shit on Instagram and TikTok as well. But we'd love to hear from you with just some basic answers of like what you like about the pod, what you don't like about the pod, and essentially what you want to hear going forward. Because we're doing this because we love it, and also because people are starting to actually listen, which is awesome. And we just want to hear from you. So if you don't mind, it'll take you no more than 5 minutes. Please fill in the survey, and we'll be incredibly appreciative. Yeah. And I promise you, everything you say, you'll start to see it, the impact of it in future episodes.
Completely.
So that's one. Two, Gene, I wanted to chat briefly about the Omega Railmaster, which was just re-released, in the past couple of weeks. For me, it's a dud. What do you think?
I think I generally agree. I think a dud is probably pretty strong, but it is a bit boring, right? At the end of the day, the Omega Railmaster is an Aquaterra with a different dial. The dials are nice. I do think the gradient in both the sort of beige brown and the gray are nice. But I think at that price point and for what the watch is, I probably go Aquaterra.
1,000%. Though I think maybe, is this more or less expensive than an Aquaterra? I'm actually not sure. I think I think on bracelet it's about $5,800. But either way, it's got to be within a couple $100 of the Aquaterra. It just seems like a kind of more casual version with a less cool dial. I think the Railmaster has like a cool history. It's like, an engineer's watch for like, and it's anti-magnetic. It's kind of like, it's sort of Omega's answer to the Milgauss, if you will.
Right.
The Rolex Milgauss. And I think this comes in a couple of sizes. I just think if you were going to re-release this watch in 2025, there was just a lot of cooler stuff you could have done with it. To me, it's just kind of boring. I think you brought this up before we actually jumped on, that its full name is actually the Omega Seamaster Railmaster, which beyond being a mouthful is also just confusing.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, is this, should I be diving with this watch, but also riding trains with it? I don't, I don't really know. Do I take the train to my dive? It's weird. But I don't know. The internet kind of went a little crazy for it this week, so I figured we should touch on it. But really not many great things to say on it from my point of view.
Yeah. Well, I'm just waiting for the Omega Seamaster, Railmaster, Speedmaster. They just need to put a chrono on it, and we've got like the complete utilitarian watch.
I love that. Let's get to the topic at hand. And as always, everyone, there's no barrier to entry here on the Dialed In Pod, just a love for watches. So with that, Gene, let's get dialed in. Let's talk common watch myths that these people all over the internet spread. I think we're always meant to feel like expensive watches are always better. What do you think about that?
I just think that's completely untrue. We're at a stage, I think both of us as collectors, where we're thinking about the utility of the watches that we have, sort of purpose driven. And I know that with my collection, I'm at a stage now where I'm definitely thinking about like certain occasions for certain things and what my collection is sort of missing. And maybe there'll be a state of the collection, episode that we can do a little bit later. But that doesn't always mean that expensive is always the best. I'm wearing a Baltic today, which, we both professed a love for that brand, very reasonably priced in sort of the greater scheme of things. So I just don't think that that's true.
Who are watches for, right? Who says that a Journe is a better watch than a Rolex Submariner? Okay, let's take two big brands, right? And then even say, who says a Submariner is better than a Baltic Aquascaf? People say it, but people say a lot of stupid shit. I don't know. Like, if you love the Baltic Aquascaf, don't feel like, oh, I'm getting a lesser watch than a Submariner. No, it may be more well known, and you may get more comments on it potentially, but you're not buying watches for other people. You're buying watches for what makes you feel good, and what makes you feel like, oh, this is the watch I wanted. This, and I like it for XYZ reasons. And if you can tell yourself that watch is epic, and I don't care what anyone else says about it, even if it's a new blow.
Yeah, I think that's completely true. I think you point to a really interesting dynamic where a lot of watch collectors are buying watches for other people. You're buying something for the impression that it makes about you. We did talk about sort of what a watch says about you in a prior episode, but you're also at that stage buying a watch for the reaction. And at the end of the day, we've said this many times, you need to buy what you like. So you've got to do that calculus for yourself. And I totally agree with you. To the extent you can articulate XYZ reason to get a particular watch, you should go for that. Whether or not it's the more kind of flashy brand or a brand that you suspect will get more attention from other collectors. You're wearing the watch. It's your responsibility, I think, to make sure you're doing it for the reasons that are meaningful to you. So I completely agree.
You're paying for marketing at the end of the day, right? Like with Rolex in particular, they have awesome movements. They're nothing great to look at, but which is why for the longest time ever, Rolex has never had exhibition casebacks until very recently. But Seiko, right? Look at the rabid community that exists around Seiko watches, and just like those are phenomenal, right? They are powerhouse movements. They come in a variety of design and aesthetics that are amazing and so totally unique to their brand. But they just don't have the same sort of prominence around the marketing of the brand that is Seiko, right? They're most of the time there's like 60-70% of the value is in the marketing.
By the way, I think Seiko has some other issues and maybe something for us to talk about a little bit later. I've generally found confusion between not confusion, but I sort of see the problem for them from a marketing perspective is having Seiko, Grand Seiko, and then I guess Crador on top of that. But Seiko and Grand Seiko in particular, I think that's where you start to have, some issues in terms of separating, the brand, especially when those two brands are meant to be dramatically different in terms of like quality and heritage and craftsmanship. So I think that's part of the Seiko problem, but probably something to discuss a different day.
Totally. Okay. The next myth is that in-house movements are always better. And yeah, I'll just start here. Like first of all, what does in-house even mean? There's a lot of debate, right? About like most people think in-house means that every single part, is produced and put together internally. There's no like regulation on what is to say that something is in-house versus a third-party movement. And beyond that, beyond this sort of semantics around what in-house really even means, I think people get so caught up because there's so many YouTubers and people on the internet and people at boutiques who will tell you that, it is so important that this watch has an in-house movement. It means nothing. Okay. Like it means something to the extent that you want to just pay more because they've had to like verticalize their supply chain to actually produce these movements in house. But there are amazing third party movement manufacturers, and not to mention that. I mean, I think it was Rolex went fully in house only in 2005. Right. And Patek Philippe, Audemars Piguet, every big brand you mentioned that has a ton of history, has used third party movements, and it's been fine. And it's sort of like this new thing in the last 20 years that the idea of in-house movements, make a watch that much more, worth it or exclusive or it makes no sense to me.
I completely agree. In fact, my AP, the chronograph that I have, the 26331 ST reference, doesn't have an in-house movement. And that was just several years ago. I think after the anniversary, they moved to an in-house movement, but there's a reason why sort of these movements exist. You're talking about reliability. You're talking about just a history of manufacturing around movements that are not in-house that are perfectly capable. And in many cases, the development over the course of many years is such that they are just superior than something you might be able to develop in-house. It's got to be a very thoughtful development process, and when you're ready to do it, great. But I think it's probably just pure snobbery, the idea that an in-house movement is always better. It's just not true. But probably something that we associate with the gravity of a watch brand if they've been able to develop something in-house, and probably dovetails into ideas around like heritage and just general craftsmanship. So I get the narrative that's trying to be created around having an in-house movement. It is marketing in some respect, but it just objectively, it's not true that an in-house movement is always going to be better.
100%, man. We put so much value on it these days, and what's wild is if you go look at like the Patek Philippe perpetual calendar chronographs, right? The newest one in the collection is 5270. That is the first in-house Patek, fully in-house, I should say, perpetual calendar chronograph. Before that, the 5970 was the last one that used the Lemania-based movement. That one sells for more on the secondary. So, like, this myth is to me just kind of stupid to begin with, and what you do with a third-party movement as a base says that you're not doesn't just imply that you're going to throw that movement into the watch and that's it. You're going to take a Solita and you're going to throw it in. These watch brands do amazing things to modify the movements, right? And they're using something that's been tested over and over again. They can hang their hat on the reliability of the movement and know exactly how it's going to work, and then they put their flair on it. And unless you're like this like really big movement geek, which more power to you, then you should care about this stuff. Like there's so much more that goes into a watch, the materials that are used, the design aesthetic, like that, like we love watches for so many things. And if you're going to, if a majority of you are going to tell me that you really care about it being in-house, I challenge you to actually tell me for more than, I don't know, talk about it with me for more than 5 minutes and really prove to me why in-house is better. And I have a feeling that a majority of you can't do it. And that's not saying anything about all of you. It's saying that the majority of people can't, they just parrot this idea that, oh, it's in-house, so it's great. So yeah, stupid myth, debunked.
Debunked.
Okay. What about Swiss made? Swiss made is superior to being made anywhere else in the world.
Totally untrue. Just, any objective measure would tell you that clearly Swiss made watches are good. Again, there's history. There's a whole kind of narrative that's been made around the craftsmanship and heritage of Swiss made watches. That said, I do think there are a ton of brands that exist outside of Switzerland that are incredibly good. I'm immediately thinking about Lange, and mostly because all of that, the craftsmanship, the finishing, it's all incredible, and not Swiss. So I just think that's totally untrue and probably a marketing tactic from Swiss watch brands to steer you in that direction. They're great, obviously, but they're not always the best. It's just totally untrue.
Yeah. So you mentioned Germany, and then I think you left out Japan, which obviously just has insane watchmaking.
Yeah.
And let's just step back a second. And I don't know if many people know this, but Swiss made is an official designation that was invented by, wait for it, the Swiss. Okay. It's monitored by the Swiss. It is from time to time amended by the Swiss. And then it's, created. The whole reason it's created is to reinforce just sort of the brilliance of Swiss things, which is great. And every country should do their thing and promote their largest driver of their economy. But where watches are concerned, Swiss made means that at least 60% of the value must be created in Switzerland, and 50% of the essential manufacturing must be done there. 60% of the value, you can just create the balance, essentially, an escapement in Switzerland, and the rest can all be from China, right?
Yeah.
And or anywhere else in the world, and you can call it Swiss made. I think the final piece of it is that the casing and final inspection also happens in Switzerland, but which means essentially that your Swiss watch, in quotes, might well be made from significant parts coming from elsewhere, like China. Which again, that shouldn't be a bad thing. But this idea of Swiss made is largely just to promote Switzerland. And so you have to remember we're just being marketed to.
Yeah, it's a malleable notion. With tariffs, there's been quite a few videos on TikTok and YouTube about luxury goods, where they're manufactured, how they're constructed, and what it actually means to be, made in Switzerland or made in Italy, that kind of thing. So it's definitely a fungible thing, and stay watch woke. Why don't we talk a little bit about water resistance? Look, it's also another myth that is crazy, and one that we should probably address mostly to keep you out of trouble. Just know that whatever the rating is on a watch, particularly at the lower end, talking 30 to 50 meter water resistance, does not mean that you can take it into the ocean at 30 or 50 meters. Just know that 30 to 50 meters probably means that it's more splash resistance. So washing hands, wearing it in the shower is probably a risk.
Well, I think it's more of a risk in the shower for other reasons, right? I think no matter what the water resistance is, those are tested at static and cool temperatures.
Exactly.
Right? So there's a whole idea of sort of heat and moisture with the shower.
100%. So there's sort of this concept of static resistance and dynamic resistance, which is how, again, watches are tested in terms of static pressure. And it doesn't take into consideration, to your point, heat or the movement of water, which means that, at say even 100 meters, you might be okay with swimming, but you're still probably running some risk. I probably wouldn't dive or swim with anything less than 200 meters, truthfully. But just something to be aware of, that the actual number isn't what you would expect to be the water resistance in real life.
All right, next one. This is a hotly debated topic. Quartz watches can't be true luxury. Thoughts?
Yeah, I just don't think it's true. Look, it's all part of the narrative that we've been sold. We've referenced marketing multiple times here. The quartz crisis, or the quartz revolution, which we all know about in the 70s and 80s, it happened for a reason, because quartz is, in fact, good. It is cheap. It is highly accurate. It is reliable. These are all incredibly good things when having a watch.
But is that luxury, Gene?
Yeah, but it can be. It can be. Journe has a line of quartz watches that I think are incredibly collectible as well.
Can I say that's one of my favorite watches, period. And I don't put the qualification of favorite quartz watch.
Yeah.
But the FP Journe Elegant series is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And do yourself a favor, if you haven't done a deep dive on these watches, like, go read about the Elegant. It is unbelievable. It's like it stays powered for something like 8 or 9 years before you need to get the battery changed, because they've first of all, if you look at the case back, it is beautifully designed quartz. Like, it is done to the level, it is finished to the level that you'd expect any Journe watch to be, mechanical or otherwise. And there is a little, like, micro rotor type thing on the front of the dial that basically figures out when you're moving your wrist and actually wearing the watch. And if it doesn't detect any movement for 30 minutes, it actually just stops the quartz. It stops the power to the watch. But then when you pick up the watch, it'll recognize how long it's been off power, if you will, and then reset the time to the accurate time, which is just so cool. And how is that not luxurious?
Yeah. I mean, luxury to me it's about the technical achievement. It's about the design. It's about the materials and the finishing. Quartz is very low on the list of what I would consider a factor in terms of luxury. So I just think this myth is totally untrue.
All right, tell me. Watches are good investments. And you're going to hear this all over YouTube, but especially from gray market dealers. Watches are great investments.
Yeah. I mean,
tell me about it, Gene.
They can be. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that that's totally untrue. But I do think in terms of putting together your collection, starting one, or as you develop, more watches in kind of what you own, I don't think you should consider this as a factor. Again, it's way too speculative, just knowing how the watch market has reacted over the course of the last 5 years post-COVID and the ups and downs we've had. This shouldn't be the cornerstone of your investment strategy at all. And if you're doing it that way, you're in for a pretty rough go at it, most likely. So I just couldn't say this like categorically that watches are good investments, but they can be.
Yeah, they can be, but let's just talk about this as a broad statement. Like a new car, the vast majority of luxury watches plummet in value the moment you walk out of a fancy boutique with it, right? Like, only a few like ultra sought after regular production models, mostly from Rolex and Patek, are truly flippable and investment worthy pieces, particularly in today's like softening pre-owned market.
Right.
And yes, there's some high-end, low-volume rarities from independent watchmakers, and you could argue that those are investments, but also unproven, right? We don't really know what that looks like 10, 20 years from now. So as we always say on this podcast, and I think we've actually managed to say it every single episode, buy what you love.
Because it's great advice.
Yeah, if it holds value or goes up, that's a bonus.
Completely, 100% agree.
Okay, I'll never have the chance to buy this watch again. And I'll take this one because I know I put this one on the list. But like, we in this hobby, in this passion, whatever you want to call it, addiction, we tend to get very caught up in this is my chance to buy this watch and I must buy it. Sometimes that's brought on by a sales associate who's kind of pushy and who's like, hey, like this offer is only good, until you walk out of the store, and then, I got to call a bunch of other people on this list, and, or you've just bought a watch and you're so happy with it, and then that Rolex AD you thought would never calls you for a Rolex Pepsi. And you're like, oh shit, what do I do? One, you could sell the watch you just bought if it's not something that you really wanted, and this Pepsi GMT is your ultimate, grail watch, whatever it is. Or you can just say, you know what, this is not a prudent financial decision for me right now, and I will have a chance to go buy this watch again, right? This is not, none of this is like, the Rolex makes 1 million watches a year plus, 1 million plus watches a year. Unless it's something that you truly have been looking for and they only have made 5,
right.
In 1962, right. And like, you found the perfect example, sure. Then there is definitely exception to this rule.
Yeah.
That there may be a time where you find a watch that you'll really never have the chance to buy again. But 99% of the time, you're going to have the chance to buy it again. Do not be pressured into buying something that you either can't afford to buy at the time or just feel uncomfortable buying. Walk out.
Yeah.
Like, these are expensive things we're talking about, and we've just been made to feel like there's this air of scarcity around every single watch produced ever, and that's just not true.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. With new watches, I think you are going to get the opportunity again at some point. There are certainly watches like a Pepsi, for example, that if you pass on it, it may be a while before it comes back around again. But if it's truly a grail watch of yours, I think you should consider making room for it in your collection by selling something else, or just planning for it ahead of time and just making sure that you've got the funds set aside. With vintage watches, I will say that there is truth behind the idea that there might not be another example of this kind available. If you're talking vintage, there are sort of conditions that come sort of across when you're looking at something where it might be just immaculate or a perfect example of this particular reference. And if that's true, then maybe this statement of not having the chance to buy a particular watch again could be true. But I do think there's a distinction to be made between vintage and new, and generally speaking, the statement is untrue.
Okay. Another one is you can't negotiate when buying a new watch from a boutique.
Now, I've never done this before.
So I have 2 experiences. One is pre sort of watch hype market craziness. 2017, I bought my Royal Oak, 15400 ST. This is at the time where AP wasn't only running their own boutiques. They had authorized dealers. And I was able to negotiate the price down, which is crazy and unheard of now to think about negotiating the price of a Royal Oak bought new. But, that was the world we were living in 2017. However, in 2024, I want to say, it was actually the day before New Year's Eve, that I was in Switzerland at Gubelin, which is a very well-known watch boutique and jeweler around the world. I bought my pink gold Reverso Duo Face, and I fell in love with this watch in the boutique. I did not walk in expecting to buy it. I was actually walking in to go see what Pateks, if any, they would offer me. I ended up just trying on this Reverso, and I never owned one in the past, and absolutely fell in love with it. I did the worst thing you could do, which is show my excitement to the sales associate, and so they kind of knew they had me. However, you have to remember that all these authorized dealers, have their own margin that they can play around with. And so I said to the guy straight up, I was just like, one, I think JLC has raised their prices to a level that doesn't make sense. And I love this watch. I want to walk out with it today. I understand that I'm a U.S. citizen shopping in Europe, so I already get the VAT back, which is great. But frankly, that's not enough. And they kind of came back. He said, let me talk to my manager. Went back and came back with the price. And I said, you know what? I really appreciate the movement, but it's just not good enough. And, you know, I need another €1,000 off. Otherwise, like I'm okay walking out of here. And, you know, it's totally okay if you can't do that. And then they went and conferred again, and he came back with his sort of best and final, which was, I don't know, €100 more than I had asked for. And I walked out with it, and I got a significant discount. Like I'm talking like 5,000-6,000 euro off of the watch. It was, you know, it was a 30,000 euro plus watch, but yes, you can negotiate. Now, negotiating directly with the brand, like at a you know, what is it called, at a like AP house, that's not going to happen. They're going to laugh you out of there, even if it's a code. I mean, I haven't tried, but I'd assume because it's the brand itself, they're not going to be willing to negotiate, and they know that there's, you know, hundreds of you waiting outside, waiting to buy this watch to start a purchase history or whatever. But when you're dealing with a dealer who, again, is just kind of buying wholesale and selling it at the suggested retail price, they have some margin there, and they can play around with it. And you got to remember that. And you also have to be, if you're going to be willing to negotiate, you have to be willing to walk away, right? That's just rule of negotiation. You can't show your cards too early, and you can say you're going to go think about it and give them your number. And I guarantee you, if you're asking for a reasonable discount, you know, 10%, 10-12% off the price they're offering you, they're probably going to text you and tell you to come back into the boutique. If you buy a watch you don't like, sell it and get something else. Now, this is an interesting one because we may differ on our opinion here. Any thoughts on that before I weigh in?
Yeah, I've definitely been in the position where I've purchased something and felt like I'd made a mistake, but I've always tried to remember that there's something about the watch that I actually liked. You know, I did pull the trigger for some reason. That said, there have been instances, and I'm thinking of one in particular, where I did feel a little bit of pressure from the sales associate. And there's one watch that even after time, I've probably gotten to the place where, if given the right opportunity to sell it, I would. But yeah, it's a bit of a tough situation. Have you been there before?
Oh, I've been there tons of times. You know, I mean, I think like we romanticize these things so much. We do so much research, and we fall in love with a watch without even seeing it, right? And sometimes you get it and it kind of falls flat. And I listen, I think it's great to be able to sell a watch, and that there's this whole secondary market that exists. And I'm definitely not saying don't go sell your watches, but I am saying that if you buy a watch, give it time to settle in. You know, like you'd be surprised that sometimes like these little things that annoy you about the watch initially may end up actually being the thing that connects you to the watch going forward. And like these sort of like intricate details that bothered you at first, but end up becoming the thing you look at the most and you like about the watch, that actually make you reach for that watch in your box. And like you said, I think that was spot on, is clearly you bought the watch for a reason in the first place, right? And so you just give it some time, let it settle in, wear it a bit, you know, and feel it out in real life situations, in your lifestyle. Right. You know, if you bought a dress watch and you only have the opportunity to wear it with like jeans and a t-shirt, and then you decide to sell it, like you didn't even give that time to breathe in its natural environment. You know, like throw on a suit, go walk around with it and see how you feel. And if you've really given it some time to sort of develop on your wrist and in your natural environment, if you will, and you still hate it, yeah, absolutely go sell the watch. But I think people get treat these kind of amazing pieces as like tokens to trade. Okay, fashion brands make shitty watches.
Yeah, that's just not true. Another myth that we're here to bust. We've talked a little bit before about Louis Vuitton, Chanel, Hermes. I think there are some fashion and Cartier clearly, but there are certain fashion brands, or what are known as fashion brands or jewelry brands, that are clearly making significant headway in terms of very serious watchmaking and high horology. So this is just not true.
Agreed. It's just not true. And yes, Gucci watches, terrible, awful, awful. What are you doing buying a Gucci watch? So I mean, yes, as with anything we say, do your research, and there's exceptions everywhere. But to your point, and I've spoken about it so much on this pod, I think people are probably rolling their eyes at this point. But like Louis Vuitton and their watchmaking abilities with their watchmakers at La Fabrique du Temps like are just incredible and doing unbelievable things. And it's okay if you don't like it because you don't want Louis Vuitton on the dial of your watch. That's fine. That is your decision. But to say that the statement and that all fashion brands make bad watches is just wrong. And it's kind of an uneducated thing to say. And my answer to you would be just do your research, you know, and it's okay to not want the watch, but I don't think it's fair to throw them in a category and generalize that they're just all bad watches.
Yeah. Yeah. I think people cast way too wide of a net on that notion. And it's just wrong.
Okay. So men wear watches in the 40 millimeter arena and women wear 36 millimeters and below. Now I know this is, you know, in 2025 and where we are in sort of pop culture these days, like people are probably like, that's not a thing, but that has been a thing for a long time, right? That's sort of been like a unwritten rule, particularly in the watch industry. If like you look at how watches are categorized, even from the brands themselves as men's and women's watches, you know, it'll always be size dependent, and you know, the 36 millimeter and below will be the ladies collection, and you'll have men's watches at typically around 40 millimeters and above, maybe 38 millimeters and above. And then there's these sort of unisex sizing where you're in the 36 to 38 realm. But that's, as we've seen from people like, you know, Timothée Chalamet, and
I was just thinking about him.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. I think this whole idea of gender specific watches is kind of silly, in the sense of it goes back to what we always say is wear what you love and wear what looks good on you, wear what, you know, makes you feel good. And if, you know, watches in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s for men were 34 millimeters, why is that so different in 2025? And why is it so absurd to be able to, you know, to want to wear that watch?
Totally. I think historically there's just been an ebb and flow to what sizing made sense for a man or a woman over the years. We've seen, to your point, 70s, 80s, much smaller. We definitely went through a phase probably in the 2000s and 2010s where watches were getting significantly larger. I'm thinking Panerai, for example, where you were seeing men wear 44 and above. That was not unusual. And definitely coming out of a phase now, I think, where watches were a bit smaller, that things were sort of leaning more towards the 36 and 38 millimeters for men. And now it feels like, and I don't know if you would agree or disagree, that we're turning a bit of a corner, and I feel like watches are getting a little larger. And I think, you know, Cubitus as an example, and some of the others that are trending more towards like 42 and above.
Totally agree. Women shouldn't be subjected to just 36 millimeters and below. That's stupid.
Yeah.
You know, like one of my favorite things to see is a woman wearing a Daytona.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the sexiest things ever. And you know, it's so. And if you look, actually, I don't know about if this is true, but you do see a lot of two-tone Daytonas on women's wrists, and I think they look phenomenal, right? And that's a 40 millimeter watch, maybe a true 39.5 millimeters when you measure it. But yeah, I don't know. Gender specific is a stupid concept, and I feel like all watches should at some point just be retailed to the public and not retailed to a specific gender.
Yeah.
But of course, for marketing purposes, you kind of need to decide your lane and your demo. So I also get that. All right, a couple more here. You need to buy watches with the intention of keeping them for 10 plus years.
No. I mean, while we did have the conversation earlier about, you know, sitting with the watch for a little while before you take the you take the plunge into potentially selling it or moving out of the collection. The flip side of that is I don't think you need to keep something unnecessarily. There are going to be opportunities for you to get watches that are on your list that are grails, and you just have to make room for that sometimes. And sometimes it makes the most sense to potentially sell watches, just to put yourself in a position to take advantage of an offer that you've been given. So, I think there are always going to be parts of your collection, kind of those cornerstones that make the most sense to just keep forever. I think you and I both have a couple of watches that probably fit into that category. But everything else should probably be fluid and give yourself the chance to, add to your collection by subtraction sometimes.
But Gene, you never really own a Patek Philippe. You merely hold on to it for the next generation.
Marketing.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so this is ridiculous, right? Like not every watch is an heirloom. You do not have to pass every watch you own on to your future children. That's like to your point, it's marketing. It's the way they've been sort of put in front of us and served to us as this idea of these last forever, which is great. And that is the beauty of mechanical watches, is it's technology that lasts potentially beyond our lifetime. But that does not mean the watch needs to be with us beyond our lifetime. Like my rule of thumb, and you do not have to subscribe to this, but like I like to have 30% of my collection, roughly 30%, that is reserved for like constant churn. Because I like new stuff. I like variety. I like trying things out. And sometimes I know when I'm buying a watch, I'm like, oh, this is part of the 30%. Like this will probably not be with me by next year. But you know what? This is fun. Like we have a whole damn podcast about these things. Like, I don't know if actually I'm going to bring the next myth in, the last myth in, that like there are these game ender watches or one watch collections actually exist.
Yeah.
Guy, girl, whoever you are listening, you're listening to the 11th episode of a podcast solely about watches. I'm telling you right now, there is zero chance there is one watch that ends the desire to ever buy another watch. That just doesn't happen.
There's dozens, hundreds of new watches that come out every year. And if you are a true watch fan, it is an inevitability that something that comes out that is new is going to get your attention and probably feel like it's going to be a game ender. It's just not true. The game ender one watch collection bit is you're just setting yourself up for failure if that's what you believe.
100%. And Gene, you and I are going to do a pod on grails at some point, and just the concept of grails. Do they exist? And this kind of all fits together here. But basic advice and sort of debunking that myth of there being these game ender watches is just, come on, be real with yourself, right? And like allow yourself to have fun with it. And so like that's why I like my strategy of having this sort of portion of your collection that is constantly changing. It keeps it fun. And again, you don't have to, I'm not saying to go buy like $50,000 watches in that part of your collection. Like go buy some Baltics and again, the resale isn't great on it, but you're still going to get money back.
Yeah.
And it's a fun hobby, passion, and it's you want to be able to go experience new pieces. I don't know. The whole point of this is that it's fun to talk about this stuff. It's fun to look at videos about it, but it's the best is being able to experience it on wrist. And if you're going to just live with one watch for the rest of your life that you call your grail, that's amazing. And I kind of want you to write a book about it so I can understand like what's really beyond that.
The psychology.
Yeah. But the fact that you're listening to this podcast kind of tells me that that's probably not you.
Yeah.
Anyway. All right, Gene, this was awesome.
Yeah.
Guys, tell us if we missed any myths that you think need to be debunked. Thank you as always for tuning in. Please like, subscribe, rate, review, do all the podcast things that we do on these platforms. It'll really help. Please take 5 minutes and fill out the survey in the show notes. It's going to help us iterate on future episodes. And thanks, and see you next time on the Dialed In Pod.